In this video, we're going to be discussing price determination. Price determination is the next aspect of this chapter. In the first couple of videos, we talked about supply and demand. Now we're going to look at how supply and demand interacts in order to clear the market. So what price determination is the interaction between supply and demand in order to clear the market. Well, what does that mean? What that means is that we want the quantity supplied to equal the quantity demanded. And we'll show that a little bit more. But the best analogy I can come up with in order to clear the market is imagine that you've got an auction barn and you have a whole bunch of cattle and then you have a whole bunch of buyers. Well, you don't want the buyers to leave empty-handed. You want the buyers to all leave happy with their buying decisions, and you want all of the cattle sold. So what happens is the quantity supplied is the cattle that are currently in that auction barn. Quantity demanded would be the amount that the buyers are willing to buy at those prices at a single specific price. And what happens is we have an equilibrium price, and we clear the market, I should say, whenever all of the cattle are sold and all of the buyers are happy, to where we have the same amount of quantity demanded as we do quantity supplied. And that's just kind of a brief introduction of what we'll talk about in this video. So, prices will always adjust in a perfectly competitive market or in a free price market so that quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Remember from the previous two videos, we said that quantity demanded is the amount that is being demanded at a single specific price. Quantity supplied is the amount that is being offered at that single specific price. So we want prices to allow to fluctuate so that way we have the amount that is being offered at that single price equal the amount that is being bought at that single price. So that way we don't have any cattle left over and we don't have any unhappy buyers. So we want prices to adjust so that quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Well, this is known as the equilibrium price. Whenever we allow that price to be where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, that is also known as equilibrium price or the market clearing price. It's known as the market clearing price because that's where the market is cleared at. That's where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So if I were to ask you, what is equilibrium price? Where do you find equilibrium price? Where you say where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. So what happens if quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded? If quantity supply is greater than quantity demanded, we have what's called a surplus. That means that there is, a quick example going off the auction barn is there are more cattle coming in at that single specific price than what is being bought. Another example that I kind of go back to is lettuce. Let's say that the price of lettuce is $1 a head. So we have a whole bunch of producers who produce, say, 50,000 lettuce at 50,000 heads of lettuce at $1 per head, and they're very happy with that. And that's the amount that they're willing to offer at that single specific price. That would be quantity supplied. So they offer 50,000, and that's the quantity supplied, but then you have people on the other end buying it. And the people on the other end buying it, they say, well, at $1 per head, we only want 30,000. So what does that leave? That leaves 20,000 head of lettuce left over. That's the surplus. That's the leftover stuff. There's more being supplied than there is being demanded. So what happens? Nobody wants a lettuce. So in order to sell that lettuce, they have to drop the price. So a surplus is whenever quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, and the only way to equalize this out is you have to drop the price in order to get more people to buy it. A shortage is the exact opposite. So let's say that the farmers provide 50,000 head of lettuce at $1. That's what they're willing to offer. But the consumers, on the other hand, say, well, we wanted 80,000. We wanted 80,000 head of lettuce. We wanted another 30,000 head of lettuce at that price. Well, what is a conscious-minded retail store going to do? They're going to say, well, we're running out of lettuce on the shelves. Everybody's buying it. What can we logically do? We can jack up the prices. We can start raising prices because it's in our self-interest to raise these prices as a retail store because we know we're going to sell them. So whenever we have a shortage, that's whenever quantity demanded, that 80,000 heads of lettuce that is being demanded, that people are willing to buy, is greater than quantity that is supplied, which is the 50,000 those farmers are willing to offer at a price of $1. Whenever quantity demand is greater than quantity supplied, we have a shortage. Whenever we have a shortage, prices tend to rise. Kind of like whenever during, I forgot what decade it was, but they said that we are having a shortage of oil products. We are having a shortage of petroleum. We're running out of oil in the ground. And there was that big scare. Well, what happened to prices? Prices got jacked way up. And we see that time and time again. Whenever we believe there's going to be a shortage, whether there is or not, whenever we think there might be a shortage, you see prices start to go up. And we'll see why whenever we get a little bit later in this video. So prices tend to always move towards equilibrium. It's a self-correcting process. I've already kind of mentioned a little bit that whenever we have a surplus, prices tend to fall. Whenever we have a shortage, prices tend to rise. But we don't see any government interference. There is nobody basically sitting back on a computer, typing on the computer saying, oh, there's too many heads of lettuce out there, so let's go ahead and raise the prices. Or there's too few lettuce, let's go ahead and lower the prices. There's no major central planning agency that's doing that. There's no big brain in the sky that's doing that. It's an automatic self-correcting process because people are acting off of their own self-interest. Such as if there's a surplus. If there's a surplus, it's either that head of lettuce is either going to sit there and rot, and it's not going to get sold, and then the retail store is losing money because the lettuce is literally rotting on the shelves, or they can drop the price and sell it. So it's in their best interest to drop the price and sell it. So they're going to automatically do that. There's nobody forcing them to do it. They're just going to do it. Same thing with the shortage. If there's a shortage, people are just going to raise the prices because like I said before, if I'm a retail store, I'm going to raise the prices to make more money. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to know that I can get away with it because the quantity demanded is higher than the quantity supplied. People are going to buy people are going to still buy it even if I raise the prices because they demand it at a higher price. So it's a self-correcting process by people working in their own interest. Adam Smith said that this was the invisible hand. There's nothing really going on, but it's this invisible action kind of pushing prices the way they need to go. And it's because of people working in their own self-interest. So, what does this really look like? Now, we said we want equilibrium price or market clearing price to where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Well, if you remember back to the supply and demand video, we have this graph, but you've never seen this graph where we have quantity supply, or where we have supply and the demand curve on the same graph. So, well, let's start up here. We have this quantity supplied and then quantity demand and quantity supplied schedules up here. So this is the demand and supply schedule. We have it on the same graph. So this is quantity demand, quantity supplied. Right here, we said that we want quantity supplied to equal quantity demanded, or quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. Up here, we have where quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. Well, if we have quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, we can look over here, that's a shortage. People are wanting more at $1 than what is being offered. So, as a result, people jack up the prices. Because they say, well, the demand's there, so we can just go ahead and raise prices a little bit. Well, they raise prices. Say they raise it by 25 cents. Quantity demanded is still greater than quantity supplied. So we raise prices a little bit more. 150, quantity demanded greater than quantity supplied. And in all of this, we have a shortage. I'm going to label ST for shorthand. And all of this, up until this point right here, in all of these, quantity demand is greater than quantity supplied. Because quantity demand is greater than quantity supplied, they're going to keep raising prices until we find that equilibrium price. We finally get to $2.15. Now the quantity demanded actually equals quantity supplied. That's your equilibrium price. We have just enough being wanted as what is being sold. Everybody leaves happy. If we go back to that auction barn example, all of the cattle are being sold, all the consumers or all the buyers are leaving happy. Go back to lettuce. All of the consumers are able to buy lettuce that want to buy lettuce at that price. All of the heads of lettuce that is being offered at that price is being sold. So what we happen to have is equilibrium right here. Prices will actually, whenever there is a shortage, prices will increase up until equilibrium, until that equilibrium price right there, and then it will stop. But what happens if prices are at $1.75? Well, now only 1.9 units are being demanded, but 13.6 units are being offered. So what's happening here? There's more that is being offered. There's more, if we go back to lettuce example, there's more lettuce being on the shelf than what is being bought. So it's either going to sit there and rot or somebody's got to sell it at a lower price. So here we have a surplus. And in these three levels we have a surplus. So what do prices have to do? Prices have to fall. And they have to fall because it's either going to sit there and rot or they sell it. So we take these two demand and supply schedules, we put it on a graph. Just like the graphs from the last two videos, we have price over here, quantity down here. We have our two curves. This is the first time both the curves have been on the graph, but if you see right here, both of the curves are labeled. So now we know that we have the supply curve, which is upward sloping. We have that demand curve, which is downward sloping. And these curves represent the demand relationship and then the supply relationship. It represents that relationship. But a single point on that graph, so let's say like that point right there, that represents a quantity demanded. A single point on there would represent a quantity that is being demanded. Same as here. At that specific point, that is the quantity that is being supplied at that price. So we can say that at a single specific price of $1.50, we have 3 units being supplied. So a single point on that line would be your quantity supplied or quantity demanded. But if we look at the whole curve, that shows a relationship between prices and quantity, and that is a demand or supply relationship. So we see right here, right where supply where it crosses that demand curve, that is your equilibrium price. That is where the quantity demanded is actually equal to your quantity supplied. That would be your equilibrium or market clearing price. Because as you can see, we have the exact same amount being supplied as the amount being demanded. So if you were to see a graph and said, where is equilibrium price? Right there, where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. That's also known as your market clearing price. That is a fundamental aspect of price determination. So whenever we define supply or demand, at the very end of that definition it says ceteris paribus, meaning holding everything else constant. We're looking at one market at one time and all the supply or demand relationship in that market at that time and allowing nothing else to change. Well, do we live in a world without change? No, we don't. We have things changing all the time. So what happens if we have something change? For example, what if we have a supply or demand curve shift? What if there's a change in the ceteris paribus condition, meaning some external force is causing these prices to change in some way? Some external force is causing the supply relationship or the demand relationship to change. And in the next video, we're actually going to look at a couple of those ceteris paribus conditions that would cause this. But for now, let's just say that there is something going on that affects either this demand or supply curve. So what happens? There's a change in the ceteris paribus condition. An example of that would be, let's say that lettuce and spinach are substitutes of each other, meaning you can either eat lettuce or spinach, and you're eating lettuce because it's cheaper. Well, what happens if the price of spinach falls? Well, it might fall just enough where you're more inclined to buy more spinach and less lettuce. So now the demand for lettuce has now fallen, has now changed. Because the prices are staying the same, but now the quantities have shifted in some way, shape, or form. It's not exactly the same anymore because you are taking what money you would have been spending on lettuce and you're putting it into, say, spinach, for example. So there's something going on to cause a change in some way. So we have a change in the ceteris paribus condition. that could be something like the price of spinach falls, so now the demand for lettuce falls or shifts inward. So it causes a disequilibrium in the beginning. This disequilibrium, remember, an equilibrium is whenever we're at this specific price. And if we're above that equilibrium, if we're in that surplus, remember, prices are going to be driving this down because people are going to be wanting to sell those products rather than just keeping it on the shelves. And if we're in a shortage, prices are going to go up because the retail stores or the people selling the product realize that they can sell it for a higher price. So prices always move back towards equilibrium, and then they generally, whenever they get there, they try to remain stable. But we have this disequilibrium. Change in the ceteris paribus condition causes a disequilibrium, and it causes a shortage or surplus. And it'll react until it gets into a new equilibrium. So let's kind of look at how this happens. We have the same curve as what we did before. We have the same prices, the same quantity demanded, the same quantity supplied, but now something happened and we have a brand new quantity demanded schedule. We have a brand new quantity demanded relationship. And this example could actually be something like the price of spinach fell, so now the amount that people are demanding of lettuce is actually fallen. So this might be the amount of lettuce that they demand, but it's now not as high as before. As we can see, at $1, they used to demand 15 heads of lettuce. Now they only demand 13.9. It's kind of a simplistic example, but it's a real deal. So, and for example, let's say at $1.50, they used to demand 12.5. Now they only demand 10. So now they demand less lettuce at the same price. So that demand relationship is now drastically changed. So we take these schedules, just like we did over here. We took these schedules and we put it on the graph. We're going to do the same thing right here. We take these same schedules, we take all three of them and we put them on the graph. This right here is our new demand curve. Here's the old demand curve, and we can see equilibrium price was at 215. Equilibrium quantity was at 775. But now we have this new demand curve, and we look here and we say, all right, where equilibrium used to be right there at that level. Well, now quantity supplied no longer equals quantity demanded at that level. So we go up, and now we see that quantity supplied equals this new quantity that is being demanded at this level. And that equilibrium price is actually falling. So what we see is, because of this price of the substitute has fallen, we see an inward shift of the demand curve. We see a leftward shift of the demand curve. And because of that, we see that the equilibrium price has now fallen to $1.90. Because if prices were to still stay the same at this old price, so it was at $2.15, and after that demand shift, that price, if it were to remain at $2.15, we see this right here becomes a surplus. So what happens? We have a change in the ceteris paribus condition. We have a new demand curve. It causes disequilibrium because equilibrium prices, there is no equilibrium price along this line, not on the new demand curve. So we're in disequilibrium. The amount that is being demanded is either being met or exceeded. It's not equal to it. So then we have this surplus. Just like we saw right here, we have a surplus right there. So we have this surplus. What happens when you have a surplus? There's extra left on the shelf, so people need to sell them. So it drives prices down until it hits that new equilibrium of $2 or of $1.90. So this is how price determination basically works. We start off with the simple example of we have a stationary supply and a stationary demand curve. And where those two curves intersect is equilibrium price. If the price is above equilibrium, we're in a surplus and it drives prices down. Price is below equilibrium, we're in a shortage and it drives prices up. So then we figure out that this is a self-correcting automatic process. And then everything is fine once we get to stable equilibrium. Everything is happy. Everybody's happy. Everybody's getting what they want. And there's really no need for change, right until there's something else happens and there's a change in that ceteris paribus condition. And then because that changes in the ceteris paribus condition, we wind up with a new supply or demand curve. We wind up with a shortage or surplus, and it drives prices until we hit that new equilibrium. And once we hit that new equilibrium, we stay relatively stable. Now, we talked about either a supply or a demand curve shifting. Very rarely do we ever have a supply and a demand curve shift at the same time. Matter of fact, it almost never occurs. What happens is we have either a supply shift or a demand shift or a supply shift. But very rarely do you ever see both of them shifting at the exact same time. Another point I want to hit on is a little bit of terminology. And I keep talking about a demand curve shift. So a shift would be a change in the supply or demand relationship. So if the quantity demanded changes, that relationship between prices and quantity for demand changes from this one to this one, we have a shift in the demand curve. If we have to draw a brand new curve, we have a shift. But if we move along a demand curve, we have a change in quantity demanded or change in quantity supplied. So a shift is a change in the demand curve. We actually have to redraw a demand or a supply curve. A movement is a change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied, and it's a movement along the curve. So what does this look like? By us having to draw a brand new line, that becomes a shift. But if we have to move the point along the supply curve from here to here, that is a movement. This right here is a change in quantity supplied and a movement along the supply curve, where this is a change in demand and a shift in the demand curve. And this is the basic explanation of price determination.